Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Conversations. My guest this morning is Susannah Margison. Susannah is a lawyer, and she's a lawyer turned conflict strategist. So while she still practices law, Susannah has a business that really looks at what it means to survive and thrive through conflict in your personal life, in organizations. And I thought it would be a really great opportunity to have Susannah on with us this morning. And I'm going to bring her in a moment because, there's a lot of talk about things like psychological safety, and we're maybe going back to work, and maybe that's hybrid, and we don't really know all the things that are happening. And as Susannah said, and as I put in my post, we're sort of ripe for conflict. We're at an all-high level of irritability. And I thought that was a really great way to talk about that, Susannah, is that we collectively, we have never been more irritable or on the verge of sort of bursting, microburst, macroburst, whatever. And I'm just so thrilled that you could be with us this morning. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I want to dig right into this idea that we are so irritated. And obviously, you have spent time in the courtroom where people are uber irritated because they are fighting and looking for a win-lose. And there's that continuum of law. But just, talk about what that continuum looks like, not only from a legal perspective, but what conflict is starting to look like overall in our businesses. Let's keep it to a business discussion for today.
Sure. Well, I think one thing that is really sticking out, and I've really started to notice after the onset of the pandemic, when of course all of our thresholds for stress has gone way down, is that we are absolutely primed to find fault in other people. And so what we're often seeing in businesses now are people who are dissatisfied, they're unhappy, they are expressing their dissatisfaction. Everybody kind of is feeling a bit claustrophobic with everything that's gone on with the pandemic, and everybody is worried about protecting themselves. And so rather than giving the benefit of the doubt, often we'll spring straight into, oh my goodness, I'm under threat. And that makes sense because we've been under threat for a couple of years from a virus. And when I talk about collective irritability, I mean, certainly I'm talking about our generation. We can't speak for previous generations, but certainly in my lifetime, I have not seen any kind of irritability, collective irritability like we've seen right now. And a lot of that is because a lot of us have dealt with a lot over the past couple of years, and it's showing up in our businesses and in all aspects of our lives.
Mm-hmm. And it feels like everything is so polarizing these days. Like if you have an opinion on something, you have to sort of quietly find your people. Because if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, game over.
Well, so the heart of all conflict is somebody thinking that they are right and the other person is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that is sort of where things start, is my way is better than yours. It's as you've said, win, lose, black or white. And I think about it as an or thing. So either my way is correct or your way is correct. And what we need to do is we need to start coming back and substituting or with and asking ourselves, is there a way that my way is correct and maybe your way could be correct? Or is there a way for us to collaborate the two and really try to work towards coming together in harmony? Not to sound cheesy, but that's really what it comes down to. And there are lots of very polarizing topics and lots of topics that we all feel strongly about, and that we might genuinely feel there is an absolute right or wrong. Right. And certainly they are there. But the reality is that very few of us are actually experts in those topics. We're kind of assimilating information that we're getting from all kinds of different sources. And so it is really important to remain open-minded, because if we don't, we're just going to end up down this path of divisiveness. And we've had a taste of what that can look like in a society.
No kidding. And, you know, you use the magic word in coaching. You're a certified coach. I'm a certified
Mhm.
coach. And, you know, replacing but with and or with and can
Exactly.
make such an enormous difference and really bring levels of irritation and heightened emotions back down a little bit.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's really interesting to remember is that if the other person is so staunchly in their view that they're correct, it can pay dividends to listen to why they feel that way, because oftentimes it's a pathway to understanding, but sometimes it is actually a misunderstanding. You know, there's just been a miscommunication somewhere, and with that correction, things can kind of come back into a path of collaboration and ease, as you like to say. There are times when we will get into discord where, you know, we do not like each other's differences, and it's sort of escalated into a bit more of a relationship issue, which would require a bit of a different approach. But often, you know, we can understand each other just by listening and asking questions and remaining curious.
Mhm.
Most conflict theory out there will tell you that step one is to be curious and try to understand and try to leave yourself open. As my partner, who I think is incredibly wise, would say, he always leaves himself open to the possibility that maybe he's wrong. And I've learned a lot from that approach. It's a really great approach.
Well, I love it when my husband leaves himself open to being wrong. Sorry, Curry, I think you're probably on the call. I mean, that's just it brings me, you know, little bits of joy. But I will admit I love being right. And there's something that goes on, I think, for us when we realize that we've been digging in when we haven't needed to dig in. So, you know, being curious is an awesome step. But when you're in it, like let's talk about when you're in it. What are you have a very unique uh, purview to conflict, being still a practicing lawyer, um, and working with organizations around the conflicts, whether it's individual conflict, HR related conflict, or just, you know, people, teams not kind of working together. But you have a very interesting purview. So what do you do when you realize that you're locked in and you think, maybe this is not where I really need to be? Like, how do you recover from an ego perspective? From, you know, the like, what is holding you back, and what are some of the things that you can do?
So that's a really interesting question, and I'll say, you know, to be totally upfront, I have done a lot of work on this over the years because, and I actually posted something about this yesterday, where I find it very easy to advocate for somebody else, or, you know, to step up for somebody else's interests. But when it becomes me, when it's my interests on the line, or my self image on the line, because really that's what conflict is about. It's often about more than just the surface issue. It's often an identity issue. It can sometimes be a values issue. And
Hmm.
ego, as you've said, plays a really big role. So I've had to do a lot of work to check my ego at the door, and to release the attachment that I have, to that issue. So one thing that I do, quite often when I'm in conflict, and I should be very, very honest. And there's a saying that says, "The lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client." And I think a lot of us who are in these businesses, you know, we might be experts when it comes to somebody else's stuff, but as soon as it's our own, there's an emotional vortex that comes along with it. And that's why conflict is so interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I pivoted, is because being a lawyer, you deal with the surface issue, we deal with the symptom, we deal with the fact that there's a legal issue to be solved. But
Hmm.
every single time there are emotions that come into it, and you do need to sort of dig a little bit deeper in order to get an actual resolution, as opposed to, you know, some literature calls it resolution by suppression, where you're sort of, it's almost like you're mediating amongst little kids, and you're, okay, no one's going to be happy now, that's it, you know, everyone's mad, you know, everyone loses the toy kind of thing. But true resolution, looks a little bit different, and it might sound a little bit utopic, if I've said that correct, but or sort of aspirational, that maybe we can find a solution that everybody is happy with. But I do genuinely believe that is possible. But in order to do that, we do have to check our egos at the door.
Mm-hmm.
The first, of course, is to notice when you start feeling like your blood is boiling. I will sometimes describe it as my blood pressure is going through the roof. I've never checked. I don't know if it actually is, but I feel myself, the blood will either rush from my face, or I'll start to feel myself get flush. I maybe will start to feel like I want to throw up. I'll feel claustrophobic. I'll feel a bit panicky. Anger jumps right in there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to recognize, and I've had to work on recognizing. I have a wonderful client who calls it a stress snap moment. That's that moment where I'm just on the cusp of completely losing my marbles, or losing it, and interrupt it and take a pause. And then I need to remind myself, what is the actual goal here? What am I actually trying to achieve? And it's not, I gave an example earlier, but in a business sense. So for example, I had one situation years ago when I was a young baby lawyer and knew nothing, where somebody screwed something up on one of my cases. And I went nuclear. Like, I was not happy. And I felt like the consequences were just absolutely enormous. And what I needed to take everything into perspective, and I needed to remind myself what my actual goal was. So it wasn't just about getting something to the courthouse on time. It wasn't on time, but it was still accepted. So no big deal. I was mad about the principle of the thing. But really, my actual goal was at the time to be a respected lawyer. I was shooting for partnership in that particular law firm. I wanted to have good relationships with everybody, including the person that had made the mistake. Yeah. And when you step back and remind yourself of that actual goal, as opposed to the one that's kind of blaring you in the face, you'll realize that resorting to a victim mentality, or a villain, sort of victimizing yourself or villainizing somebody else, or anger, is probably not going to serve that overall purpose. And so if you just take a minute and, recalibrate, that can actually be incredibly powerful in those moments, even if you need to say, you know what, can you just give me 5 minutes, and then we'll revisit this.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what did your friend call it? The
stress. So it was my client, and it was the stress snap moment. And as soon as she said that, I thought, oh, brilliant, because the moment of stress right before she's about to snap.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it is biological.
Absolutely.
It's the amygdala hijack is what it's often called, but I like the stress snap moment, because your biology does take over, and it's there to protect you. Although, the amygdala doesn't know the difference between a fire alarm going off because the toast is burnt, or the fire alarm going off because the house is on fire.
Well, and some of us do have that hyperactive fight or flight response, which is, I think, just another term for what we're both describing. And really, the fight or flight is those are the two responses to conflict that are not always the best. And I say not always because sometimes you do actually want to get out of there, and sometimes you have no choice but to fight. But most of the time, if you're in an interpersonal conflict at the office, fighting is going to get you fired potentially, and avoiding it and letting it sort of simmer and build resentment is also not going to help the team. So so it's interesting that those two instincts actually probably won't help us as much in conflict if they are used by default. If they're used deliberately and strategically, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're at the boiling point and things happen, but you can come into play. And I think you even describe conflict as a gift.
It is
to embrace, as opposed to something that you want to avoid. And I know a lot of us either, the fight or flight, right? We're either in there to argue our point, or we're like, oh no, I'm getting out of here because I don't like conflict. But before that boiling point is an opportunity to dig into, I guess, what is it, our differences, and treat conflict as something that is a very powerful tool to use in organizations to move to new levels. So talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because, again, this is another lesson that I was taught by my partner. But I love to be wrong as well as being right. I'm a lawyer. Being right gives me lots of satisfaction. But being wrong, especially when I'm doing this conflict work with clients, can actually be really helpful because it can focus you onto, well, what's the correct answer. And the other thing is that when somebody tells me that I'm wrong, then that brings that to my attention and gives me the opportunity to weigh that feedback and then decide if I want to act on it. Because the reality is that if there's something going on in the organization that's causing some degree of disharmony, whether or not you know about it, it's still going to be there. And it's either going to be there simmering below the surface in kind of a covert way, and causing disharmony, derailing engagement. Potentially, it could be affecting customer service. There's all kinds of research out there which talks about sort of, happy employees and and employee engagement. But if you don't know that conflict is there, or that simmering disharmony is there, that's not going to change the fact that it's there. So if it's being brought to your attention, that's the opportunity to fix it. And that is the gift. And sometimes, and this is just like what a court of law would do, sometimes the evidence gets presented to you and you weigh it and you say, okay, well, the person who is advancing this complaint may not be the most credible for a variety of reasons. Maybe the person, through no fault of their own, wasn't aware that we had a solution, or maybe they were misunderstanding something, or maybe for whatever reason you don't want to act on that information, but you might actually want to act on that information. So that information is twofold. Number one, you want to know if there's disharmony in your organization. That's, the people that say, I don't want to know about it, work it out amongst yourselves. Actually, I would respectfully say you do want to know, because that's valuable information and insight to have in terms of what's going on. The other thing is that the information that something could be better is such a gift, because it's almost like the emperor's new clothes. If the emperor is rolling around naked, the fact that no one's telling him doesn't change the fact that he's got his birthday suit on, right? So the same thing applies to organizations.
I think this is interesting. I've been independent, but I've worked inside large organizations a lot over the last 20 years. And I've been on leadership teams, and I've been the person responsible for maybe implementing a 360 tool, across the board, or, part of Gallup engagement surveys and that kind of thing. And people love anonymity on large scale surveys because they think they can, finally tell the truth. Right. But the smaller you get, so let's say it's an intact team and I'm the leader of that team, and I want to find out where the discourse might be. That's tough. Like, that's a culture that allows people to actually voice their opinions. And I mean, even with 360s, I've heard things like, I've decided to tell the truth. Like, oh my goodness, this person's probably going to be destroyed with their 360 feedback because, somebody finally got to tell the truth. So how do you, big surveys that'll statistically come out to tell a truth. But when you bring it down to a team that needs to work together, or let's say a leadership team who's trying to figure out the back to work thing and who's going to be happy and who's not going to be happy, people are ultimately afraid for their jobs. If they say the wrong thing, they're afraid of being out of relationship, or being, the unpopular side of the argument. So what are some of the things, very practically, that these organizations can do?
So the first one that comes to mind is culture, and kind of creating a culture where that kind of feedback, the feedback coming to leadership, as well as feedback being given by leadership, is celebrated and welcomed. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that, and I say this to people a lot, because I came across a study that it was about people who were either sort of on parole, or perhaps they had elected to go through a different sort of alternative restorative justice program instead of being in prison. And they have, so it's almost like a halfway house. And I'm happy to refer you to the source of the study, because I feel like I'm going to paraphrase and make a couple of mistakes. But the gist of it is that they have this program that these individuals enroll in, and they have various businesses. And their businesses are things like moving companies, where, you really need to have a lot of trust in the people doing it. These businesses are some of the highest rated businesses in their geographic location. And one of the reasons for that is that they have what they call game night, where it's almost like open season. They sit in a circle and everybody has an opportunity to give each other feedback. And the thing is nobody has any training in how to deliver the feedback. So you might get some feedback that's really harsh and kind of feel like a slap up the side of the face. But everybody's supposed to take the feedback to their pillow and process it. And by processing it, they're supposed to kind of sift through the noise. So the personal attacks to the nuggets, to the golden nuggets that are there, because oftentimes there is a golden nugget there, whether or not we like it. There's a golden nugget there. So as individuals, we really can work a little bit more on receiving the feedback and looking for the golden nuggets, in addition to learning how to deliver the feedback constructively. The other thing is also just creating a culture where the people who deliver feedback in a way that's actually constructive, you can demonstrate that that's accepted and that's also celebrated. And so somebody that not only says, oh, our computer system is crap, but also says our computer system doesn't seem to be working, and here are the reasons why. And I'm just, if we can fix these problems, it might be really helpful. I don't have any suggestions for how to fix the problem, but maybe we can speak to so-and-so about how to do it. So if somebody's coming to the table with potential solutions or something that can be acted on, that can be really, really helpful. And so creating a culture that rewards that, as opposed to simple griping, can be really, really helpful.
Oh, there's a lot in what you said. Just that last perspective of being able to parse out the things that are important, as opposed to making those blanket statements.
It's
Right?
really hard. And, for some people, I've actually recommended, when I go in to do the 360 feedbacks, what I'll do is I'll kind of have a couple of versions where I'll piece out the bits that are personal attacks, and I can present the version that is constructive and helpful. And then we can kind of deal with the other bits. So if somebody's really feeling fragile, but really wants to see great results in their organization and to move forward, then I can always take a look and be a little bit of a sieve, just to sort of help with that. But also when I go into organizations and do that kind of thing, I will talk about, okay, what are you actually trying to achieve when you're giving this feedback? Yes, there's some safety in anonymity, but are you looking to hurt someone's feelings? Are you looking to get revenge? Because that is not what this is for. Like, our common goal here is, X, Y, and Z, the mission of the company. And that's what we're really looking for here. And, if you've got a complaint about a leader, calling them adult is not going to help, but saying it really would have been helpful if, they would have been able to find a solution for me when I was, off with COVID or whatever that may be. If it can be something that useful information we can act on to make your experience better, why not go that route instead?
Yeah. It's interesting. You just touched on something that reminded me of, I think it was Gallup that did the study that said, pre-pandemic, the question, I feel like I'm an important person at work. I'm not saying the question properly. Had a certain kind of benchmark score. And in the early days of the pandemic, that score went way up. Like, statistically, it was a significant lift, because everybody was extremely concerned, genuinely concerned about people, and we didn't know what was happening, and it was, that's a good thing. And they've just done the survey again, and it is lower than pre-pandemic
Wow.
scores right now, which says that whatever these plans are that are being created around coming back to work and opening offices, and whatever that's going to look like, it's feeling less like you're caring about me as an individual. That's a hard position for a large organization to be in, because there is a point where you have to sort of speak to the masses. But that in and of itself is a great sort of a moment, aha, to say there's conflict waiting to happen.
Absolutely.
So what would you say, or what would you offer? We've got like 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
To a leader who is trying to figure this out and knows that it's not going to please everybody. Like, what would be the one or two number one things that a great leader should do?
So I mean, I think transparency right now is probably going to be really important with people. And the other thing is not making rules up as you go along is also going to be important. So when it comes to anything, pandemic related, my advice to organizations is usually, at least fall back on your local public health guidelines, because that's something that you can say, they're the expert. The other thing is bringing it back to that common goal. So our goal is to serve our clients in a powerful way. Our goal is also to do our best to keep you safe. And that might mean if somebody has elected to come forward and say, listen, I'm immunocompromised and I'm really scared about coming back into work, maybe you accommodate that person. But it's sort of, I think people need their rules of engagement, and we need our guiding posts for this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of saying, listen, this is what we've prioritized. We've prioritized being able to serve our clients powerfully. We want to make sure that you're safe. We want to make sure you're able to do your job well, and kind of bringing it back to that so that people understand the rationale behind what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, of course, is bringing it back to common values. And sometimes that requires a team meeting, sort of saying, okay, look, guys, like if you can't accommodate someone with working remotely, then bringing everyone together and saying, look, nobody likes wearing masks. However, we do have some concerns because there are people who are immunocompromised or people who have individual complaints, and let's come together as a group and try to work to find a solution so that we can all unite towards this common goal. I think people are tired of rules. To be fair to everybody, we're all sick, like I'm sick and tired of rules. We all want to feel like we have some kind of autonomy. We all want to feel like we have a voice, and we all want to feel heard. And it's hard. It's hard with bigger organizations. I've seen them sort of trickle this down and do it on a team level. People are still scared, and there's still emotions that go behind it. And so I think you really touched on it beautifully at the beginning when the Gallup survey said, we all felt important. It's because we were touching on that shared humanity, and we might need to come back to that as we're sort of emerging out, the other side.
Yeah, I think so. Well, gosh, Susannah, you and I could talk. I mean, we do talk for ages when we but we can definitely talk on and on. But I want people to know how to get in touch with you. So Susannah is at margisons.com and Susannah at margisons.com. So if you even think that you are on the precipice of struggling with some conflict, some irritability in your organization, you absolutely want to get in touch with Susannah. So Susannah, thank you so much for being here this morning. It was a real treat. I'm always shocked at how fast this goes. I think, oh my gosh, what are we going to do to fill a half an hour? And then poof. So for everybody who attended, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, you can watch the replay live afterwards. And next up, so this happens every other Wednesday, next up is a lovely woman, Christina Timms, retired financial advisor who has written 3 books specific to the world of being a financial advisor. But she says it's for financial advisors, and I'm saying this stuff is relevant in terms of building a solid strategy, creating the kind of team that is going to serve your clients, and that ultimate question: what are you going to do with this business when you want to retire? How do you transition out? So more information to come on that. Again, Susannah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you.
Have a great day, everybody.